Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. It's a new year and a new legislative session is already underway. Between tax cut proposals, healthcare worries, infrastructure, and more, it's going to be a busy next 3 months. This morning, we'll hear from House Speaker Philip Gunn, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann on their priorities for the 2023 session. Also, Governor Tate Reeves sidesteps potential veto overrides as he makes official his bid for a second term in the mansion. That's all ahead this Sunday on Mississippi Insight.
The 2023 session of the Mississippi Legislature is now in session. Please let the House come to order.
And so begins a busy session of the Mississippi State Legislature. The House and Senate have an immense amount of work to do in this 2023 session. And they have a lot of money in the Treasury to work with this year. Almost $4 billion in budget surplus going into this session. It's little surprise that lawmakers and state politicians would seek divine guidance this week. They gathered for the legislative prayer breakfast Wednesday. It's a bipartisan gathering, and this was the first since the COVID-19 pandemic. Event organizers believe in providing leaders with support as they tackle budgets and laws that impact the lives of every Mississippian. We got a good look at the challenges ahead for lawmakers from two wide-ranging news briefings at the state capitol. Both Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann and House Speaker Philip Gunn previewed the session for reporters and offered their priorities for this session ahead. We'll hear from Mr. Hosemann shortly. First, here's Speaker Gunn speaking to reporters Tuesday.
We're thrilled to be back again for another session, 2023 session, dealing with the business of the people of the state of Mississippi. Be a lot of issues, I think, that have come up this year. I think the number one thing that probably we're looking at is the surplus that we have. We have a lot of revenues that continue to come in. I think the state's in great financial shape. We've worked hard over the years to try to make sure that we're responsible with our taxpayer money. We don't spend more than we bring in. We try to make decisions that lead us to put us in this position that we find ourselves in today. I've said many times I felt like we were able to weather the COVID crisis back in 2020 because we had made good financial decisions to that point. We had money in the bank. We find ourselves in that situation again. I think we're going to have much discussion about how to spend those dollars, where we need to place those dollars. I would like to see a discussion about returning some of those dollars to the taxpayers. As you all know, we had that big discussion last year, made the largest tax cut in history last year. And with the revenues coming in like they are, I think it's certainly an appropriate discussion to have. I think we need to look for ways to help our citizens put more money back into their pockets. We are in the post-Roe versus Wade world. We have looked at a number of things within our office about issues that need to be addressed. We're going to come forward with a way, we hope, that will make adoption much cleaner, more efficient, less costly. We're looking at some things for the foster care system. We're looking at things for crisis pregnancy centers. You know, last year we did a $3.5 million tax credit for crisis pregnancy centers. Excuse me. Would like to see that number increase this year. Those crisis pregnancy, there's 37 of those around the state. They exist for the purpose of trying to help women who find themselves with an unplanned pregnancy and trying to make sure that those needs are met as well. So those are some of the hot topics, I think, that are going to arise up, in addition to other things that we probably hadn't planned on.
Jackson water crisis is pressing, but there's some debate whether Jackson should get more money from the state to help with this crisis. Your thoughts?
Well, you're right. The Jackson water crisis continues to be a problem. I will tell you that I do not think the state of Mississippi is inclined to just hand money over to the city. There will have to be discussions about if we put money there, who will supervise that, how will it be spent, what will it be spent on. I think there will be some great oversight if in fact money is put there.
When you are talking about returning money to the taxpayers, is there a particular way that you're going? Are you fully eliminating the income tax?
Well, you know, last year we championed and presented probably, 5 or 6, maybe 7 different proposals of ways to get rid of the income tax. What we were able to get was a complete overhaul of the tax structure, moving away from a progressive system to a flat tax, which is a step in the right direction, and we gave the largest tax cut in history last year. I think we can look at ways, a number of ways you can go about that. One is to look for ways to reduce the 4% to something less than 4%. If in fact we have excess revenues, and for those of you that were at the budget hearings in December, you know, they talked about $1 billion of this appears to be recurring. So we're going to have $1 billion extra dollars coming in every year. Certainly think we can support giving some of that back to the people. So there may be a way to reduce that 4% tax rate to something less, 3.75, 3.5, something like that. Another option is to accelerate that plan into a reduced time frame. Last year's plan was a 4-year phase-in. Given the revenues that we got coming in, we could probably squeeze that down to 1 year or maybe 2 and get there quicker. So those are just some of the options that we're looking at and discussions we've had.
With the prices, we're going to look at some sort of state employee pay raise.
A state employee pay raise? You know, I think we always look for ways to try to show our employees how much we value them. I will tell you that there has been discussion about the PERS retirement system. We have had additional information that they continue to struggle. So the benefits that they may receive may end up being something in the retirement realm versus salaries. But that's clearly a discussion to be had, you know, closer to the end of the session when the appropriations process takes place.
To be clear.
By the way, we did the SEC squared thing last year or the year before, I guess, and that's, you know, coming online for the state employees, and I think that's providing some additional money for them as well. So don't want to forget about the SEC squared that we did last year.
To be clear on the income tax discussion, will one of the House proposals include full elimination this year, or will you move it back?
I think we'll have those discussions and just see how much, what appetite we can get for that. As you know, I have been a champion for full elimination for over 2 years now, and I've traveled the state, I've made those speeches and extolled the benefits of full tax elimination. I think that is the best thing for our citizens. But we did what we could do last year. We'll see how much more we can get this year.
Speaker, on this part of the expansion, the Lieutenant Governor says that he doesn't make his decisions based on what the state agency says. Can you outline why your stance is kind of predicated on the division of Medicaid and whether you expect them to or not?
Well, I have said repeatedly that I'm open to being corrected. I'm not been obstinate at all. What I've said is it appears that there's the same logic that is used for Medicaid expansion is used here. It appears that I made those statements repeatedly. But I've also said I'm willing to be corrected. But it's my understanding that the Department of Medicaid may very well be able to do this without legislative action. I guess we need to verify that. But I've been told that they could do this on their own. Well, they haven't done it. They've not issued a statement in support of it. They haven't told me that I'm wrong in the positions that I've taken. So, again, I stand to be corrected, and I'm open to that. If there's information out there that I don't have, I'm fine with having that discussion. But at this point, the Department of Medicaid exists for the purpose of guiding us on Medicaid issues, Medicaid policy. They're the experts. So it seems to me, stands to reason that if they were a proponent of that, they would have issued a statement in support of that, encouraging that, or they may very well have just done it on their own. The fact that they haven't indicates they clearly are not, at best they're cool to the idea, or they're not supporting it.
That's Representative Philip Gunn of Clinton offering what will be one of his last news briefings as House Speaker. He previously announced his intention to leave the House after this session. We'll hear from his Republican colleague in the Senate, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, when Mississippi Insight continues. Delbert Hosemann is among a handful of state leaders who have announced their intentions to run for re-election. The Republican Lieutenant Governor presides over the state Senate. And just as Speaker Gunn did Tuesday, Hosemann offered his own preview of the legislative session ahead. Let's listen.
Obviously, starting the session, and for Jackson, the water infrastructure issue is pressing. Where do you see the legislature standing? Does it come up with more money to help Jackson in its water crisis?
I was just really disappointed to hear last night the federal administrator say he didn't know where all the valves were. It's obvious to me that we have some preliminary work in Jackson that has to be done before we can even allocate any more money. Between us, Hinds County and Jackson, and the city of Jackson, I think we contributed like $104 million, and then the feds have contributed $600 million. But there's some really basic needs in Jackson, I think, that need to be covered before we allocate any more than the $700 million. And basically, they need to find where the valves are. And I appreciated his honesty yesterday at the public forum, but quite frankly, it was pretty depressing. I don't think that money's the issue. I think they've got some basic stuff that they need to do before we even get to building out.
What are some other top issues you see as the session gets started?
Well, as you know, we are real concerned and very aggressively looking at the modified calendar for schools. I think you'll see that come quite early on in the session. The Senate's passed postpartum 3 times. We think that it's critical that we continue to have the infrastructure. So our emergency road and bridges, I'd like to see another $100 million go to them. We have, in addition to that, we have a significant amount of money here. The dollars are over $1 billion, $1.4 billion from last year. We'd like to give the money back that individuals paid here on their income tax. We think that's an immediate necessity. I'm not necessarily opposed to some longer-term income tax relief. I like grocery tax relief as well. But we really have to absorb that by 2026 before we start anything else. Everybody from our state economist to anybody else you talk to says we're going into a recession. We have prepared Mississippi for a recession. Most of these other states, like California, is $25 billion short. We're $1.4 billion in the good. So our legislature and the people that lead her here, from Governor Reeves all the way through Speaker and myself, we have positioned Mississippi to get ready for inflation and a recession. If that doesn't come, that would be wonderful, but we'll know that after 2026. We don't know it today, and there are many more demands on our dollar. So we need to be very careful here, y'all, about doing things short term, just for maybe an election year thing. The rebate comes about because we cut the budget 2% first. Now, in the last couple of years, we've done really well on our allocations and whatnot. So a rebate is not politically motivated. It's just that we got the dollars right now. We never had it before. If it wasn't an election year, we'd be taking the same process.
What about the hospital?
Speaking of election years, how do you balance sort of personalities and ambitions in order to have a productive session in an election year?
Oh, everybody's getting along. It'll be fine. No, I wouldn't worry about that.
On the modified school calendar, you've talked about wanting to have some incentives for school districts to switch to that model if they want to.
That's correct.
What would that look like? Is there going to be an application process? How much money could be awarded to a school district?
Well, when I looked at this, when I was in Lamar County, the actual cost was $201,000 to switch. So that's kind of my mark for the Senate side, to look at innovating. If you want to go to a modified calendar, then you would get an extra X dollars. I don't like a very complicated process to apply for that money. I think it should be pretty straightforward. If you go to a modified calendar, you get additional dollars to make sure that you've covered the expenses of going to a modified calendar. And the numbers are starting to come back, and they're very favorable. But that's not something we need to dictate from Jackson. Every superintendent needs to make their own decision. Every parent needs to be involved in each of those decisions. It's their children. So we'll let that seek its own level, but what I want to do is not have it made as an economic decision. I want them to make a decision what's best interest of these parents, making these decisions what's best interest for their children.
Governor, I know that you had one committee that talked about the hospital crisis and those that were closing. Yeah. What would you prefer to see happen, whether it be in the short or long term?
Right, and we were working on that this morning again. I went to Greenwood. And I spent an afternoon there, and I visited with their financial people. I walked through their rooms, their radiology rooms, all of the rooms in the hospital. And I was impressed with what they're trying to do. But unfortunately, they're going to lose $20 million this year. And so and that's after they've already gotten rid of their OBGYN and NICUs and others. So they've scaled down, and they're still losing $20 million. It looks to me that we're going to have some interim step here. I'll refer to it as a Band-Aid until such time as we can make longer-term decisions about healthcare in Mississippi and what is going to be provided where. I think we're at a crisis mode here on the short term, but that shouldn't dictate our long-term solutions here. And like I said, they've downsized in Greenwood. They're going to lose $20 million this year. That's going to be very difficult.
Do you see anything being done about Medicaid expansion, and especially for new and expecting moms?
On postpartum, I expect it will come again from the Senate. I'm hopeful that the House will review their look. These are working women. Okay, we're not talking about people that are not working in Mississippi. We have some of those, but those are already covered. These are working women that have children. And you can't convince me that someone that has this extended care, and there was a Texas study on this already, and there'll be others, that show that they're less likely to be pregnant again, they're more likely to see a doctor, which means the child's more likely to see a doctor. Those things are obvious to me. Now, there's one Texas report that says the same thing. So I think postpartum should be part of our agenda. It'll be part of the Senate agenda again.
The Speaker says that he will not bring it forward unless the Division of Medicaid comes out in favor. What do you make of that, and do you see that as a possibility, the Division of Medicaid coming out in favor?
Well, I don't base my decisions on what a State Department head says. I got elected to be hired, I got hired by people to make the decisions on my own. So in regards to asking someone to make a decision, that's a little bit like the fox in the chicken coop to me. You know, you should make your own decisions. Why am I asking a state agency to make a decision? What you should ask a state agency for is the numbers. Will we have better health care for women and children if we do X? X is $7 million out of a $6.5 billion budget. But we get $32 million for that. That $32 million goes to hospitals and individuals providing the care. So I don't have to have the head of the Medicaid to tell me that, although I will admit to each of you we'll be meeting with Medicaid again this afternoon to go over these kinds of issues. But that Medicaid doesn't, that's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog. We need to make the decisions in the legislature here. That's what they hired these people to do.
That's Lieutenant Governor Hosemann's take. We'll follow closely the work of Senate and House over the next 3 months. You're watching Mississippi Insight, only on WJTV. Governor Tate Reeves has made it official. The Rankin County Republican will run for re-election to a second term. He filed his registration papers Tuesday. Reeves first won the governor's office in 2019 after serving as lieutenant governor and state treasurer. During his first term, the state flag was changed, and Mississippi saw the largest tax cuts in its history. And in the wake of Roe v. Wade being overturned, Reeves says that he hopes to continue his pro-life agenda.
In our state, that being pro-life is not simply about being anti-abortion. We have to be pro-life at every step of the way. And so we want to continue to work to find ways to help moms and babies throughout Mississippi.
The governor added that more medical residency programs, they need to be brought to the state. It may come as some relief to the governor that talk of House and Senate overriding his own line item vetoes fizzled out. 12 News' Richard Lake has that.
Leadership in both the House and the Senate deemed vetoes administered by Governor Reeves an overreach of executive power. This week, the state legislature seemed poised to at least attempt an override of those vetoes. The override originated in the House after Governor Reeves line item vetoed 10 legislature-approved items from House Bill 1353. Both Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann and House Speaker Philip Gunn said they were open to working on the override effort. Yet after a lengthy recess shortly after the House convened on Thursday morning, The House took no actions with regards to the override. They cited a lack of support in the Senate. According to Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann, the Senate never had anything to deliberate.
It was a House bill, so they had to bring it out of the House. I understand today they didn't bring it out, so I guess at this point we'll never know. You know, if it had brought it out, I guess we'd have addressed it in the Senate, we'd have found out.
Thursday was the last day remaining for the House to attempt an override of the vetoes, and no further action is expected. Richard Lake, 12 News.
Continue to follow 12 News and WJTV.com for developments in the 2023 legislative session. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. From all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.